Crack on. Tēnā koutou, everyone. Good morning and welcome. I'm Bex Grace from Three Hands NZ, and I'm a partner to the Three Hands UK team, whom authored the 2020 Business and Charity Relationships Report, on which this discussion is based this morning. Don't worry if you haven't read it in all of its beautiful detail. We will be covering the key findings today, and also it's available on the Three Hands website for free download. And I will also follow up this discussion with an email with the attachment, PDF attachment for you. So I'm going to be hosting the discussion this morning, and my colleague Michael, who's based in London, who's also one of our panelists, will be ready to step in should I have any power cut or technical failure. So let's manage some expectations this morning, how this is going to run. We've got 4 key outcomes that we're going to cover, and we're going to take a closer look at today. Our panelists are going to be sharing their expectations, and we'll also be seeking your questions. We've got some polls, and at the end, I'll be asking for your reflections. So really what I'm saying is please tune in and join in on the conversation. Turn off all your other apps. Indulge yourselves with 0 interruptions for the next hour, and enjoy this interesting discussion that we've got lined up for you today. Just a quick request when it comes to asking your questions. If you can remember to please use the Q&A function for your questions, and the chat box for any thoughts, comments, feedback, just to make sure that we don't miss any good questions coming through. And a final note is that we are recording this. And we will send the link to you to re-listen or to forward, and also it's for those who are unable to make the time today. Okay, so a bit of context about the research we're about to dive into. Here at Three Hands, we exist to connect business and society. We're all about generating business value and social value hand in hand. And here in NZ, what that looks like is practical development experiences, developing leaders, but at the same time immersing them into the important social issues impacting their business, which is their employees and their customers. And we find this creates a really meaningful learning context for participants to learn and apply the skills that are needed for leading teams and businesses today. And we feel that actually business relationships between business and charity is more important now more than ever, given our current crisis. And it's really encouraging to see so many on the line with us today who share that sentiment. So thank you for joining us. So that's a bit about who we are. Before I get into asking about you and introducing our panel, let's get clearer about what we're really talking about today. The research prompts some serious rethinking about the way business and charities work together. Almost all of the charities that were surveyed, like 99%, would like more relationships with businesses. However, 86% say that they find managing those relationships really hard. And in fact, 6 out of 10 believe that businesses put their own agenda ahead of the charities they're working with. So that's our exam question for today. What can be done by both businesses and charities to maximize the benefit of working together and to minimize those challenges? So I'm just going to ask you, take like 20 seconds now to have a think. What words would you describe to, what words would you use to describe the relationship between business and charities in your world? You can either share your thoughts in the chat box, or just make a note personally. This is your start point for the webinar this morning. And it's our intention as we go through the conversation to cast some light on the possibilities available to move those relationships, either to deepen, to improve, or to renew. Okay, a couple of seconds to have a think about those words for you, the relationship today between business and community. So I'm really excited to be introducing our panel shortly. They will be able to tackle this question. We've got representatives from New Zealand Business, New Zealand Charity, and New Zealand Volunteering Sector, and of course Michael, one of the authors of the research. However, it would be helpful to also understand who you are and who's on the line with us today. So I'm going to launch a poll, which hopefully you should be able to see shortly. We'd like to know, what type of organisation are you from? Your experience. And what your thoughts are around how coronavirus has perhaps made these relationships more important or less important, or is it just the same? Just give you another 10 seconds to pop in your answers there. Okay, let's share those answers. Great, so we've got a representation from everyone on the line. Perhaps no social enterprise. Yeah, good mix of experience. So it's our intention, hopefully, will be filled where we can offer some insight on the quality of those relationships between business and community. And yeah, really interesting. It's either more important or the same as before. Most people think it's more important given our coronavirus setting. Okay, well, let's move on to introducing our wonderful panelists. Michelle, do you want to start? You're on mute. Oh, there you go.
Morena koutou. Yes, I'm Michelle Kitney from Volunteering New Zealand. The purpose of Volunteering New Zealand is to be the kaitiaki of Mahi Aroha, empowering volunteers to enrich Aotearoa. We're the peak body for volunteering, and we achieve our purpose through 3 key strategic focuses around leading, advocacy, and recognising, all in relation to volunteering in the volunteer sector and volunteers. So, and it's a pleasure to be here today. So thank you, Bex, for inviting me to join.
You're welcome. And I should point out, actually, we owe a great deal of thanks to you, Michelle. It was Michelle who really instigated this whole conversation, noting the research that came from the UK team and really thought that it resonated with our New Zealand context and suggested that we run a discussion for our New Zealand audience. So thank you for prompting this.
Pleasure.
Johanna. Welcome.
Hi, Bex. Thanks for the opportunity. My role title is Culture and Development Advisor, and I'm part of the bigger team, the People and Culture team in Genesis. In Genesis, we offer all our permanent employees 8 hours volunteering per year, and we invite and encourage them to spend that 8 hours in the community and to give back to the community where it matters to them. We've got amazing stories, heartwarming stories, ranging from individuals doing the dishes at the Cancer Society as a way of saying thank you because they survived, up to whole teams volunteering and restoring our environment. So we're in a very interesting phase, and I'm eager to learn from you and eager to share what we've tried and tested in the company.
That'd be great. Yeah, thank you. Sarah, welcome.
Kia ora koutou. Thanks for taking a minute to get to know Anxiety New Zealand a little bit. We're a non-profit charity. We've been around for a good 40 years now, helping kids, teens, adults, families and communities to learn about managing anxiety, to develop resilience and build positive mental health and well-being. So we do this in a range of ways. We have a 24-hour national helpline where we offer support and anxiety management over the phone. We also provide education. We've got helpline workers all around New Zealand. We also have clinical services with doctors and psychologists, and we provide workshops, mindfulness, resilience, and other courses, and also free peer support groups. So you can connect with us in a range of ways.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sarah. Michael, welcome.
Hi, it's really great to be joining you all from the UK, and we might be on the different sides of the world in in reality, but I think when it comes to this subject, we're actually pretty close on this. So it's really good to share this with a different audience. So just a little bit about, I work for Three Hands with Bex, but a little bit about the report. This is our third on the subject. We did the first one back in 2015, so we're starting to see some quite interesting trends. It's based on a survey of over 200 charities in the UK who focus on a whole range of different issues. And worth emphasising, I think, that the majority of those charities, or certainly a lot of them, are reasonably small, medium-sized charities. So those with a sort of a revenue of less than $1 million New Zealand dollars. So again, something that I think really resonates with the environment you guys have in New Zealand. You know, you've got a large number of, I think the largest number of charities per head, per capita. So, you know, there's a lot to be looked at in that small and medium player space in the charity sector. And the other thing, just to add about the report, you know, this data came from before coronavirus. There was such a time, but I think what's really important is if anything, the current crisis has just made what we've discovered over the years more acute. You know, to give you an example, I think we can safely assume that charities now have a greater need to collaborate with businesses and fewer resources to do so. You know, I think that people and businesses have an even greater desire to connect to local communities, and we've seen that really awaken as a result of COVID. And similarly, charities have so much expertise and insight to share about so many of the challenges we're now facing. So yeah, exciting time to tell you about the report.
Yeah, and welcome, Michael. Hope it's not too late over there for you. And so, yeah, thank you for your introductions, panelists. Really looking forward to hearing each of your examples and perspectives. But let's crack on with the first discussion point, which is really, too often corporate volunteering continues to be driven by what businesses want rather than what charities need.
Exactly, that's exactly what we found. I mean, overall, we're hearing that more and more charities are saying that they need employee volunteers. So, you know, 82% of people replied said so in 2015. That was up to 96% of people who responded to the survey this time. So overall, big increase in the need. But this graph that I'm sharing with you on the screen, I think is particularly illuminating. You know, we asked charities what support do you need and what's being offered. That's what the orange and the red bars are. And there's some pretty big discrepancies here. You know, at one end, we're told fundraising, pro bono support, sharing business skills are really big needs. They've actually been the three biggest needs throughout our three reports. But there will continue to be some quite large gaps there between the need and what's being offered. By contrast, there's areas where there's a lot more offer than the charities say they need. And for that, I particularly highlight the unskilled volunteering point. And this has actually risen quite a lot over the years. It's up from 2015. So there's a big need for volunteers, but there seems to be a bit of a discrepancy between what businesses are offering to these charities and what charities are saying they need. And with that in mind, it's interesting. There's a sense from charities, I think, that businesses sometimes don't take the time to really understand what the needs of the charity are when it comes to volunteering.
Yeah, it's a good point. Michelle, let's bring you in. What are you noticing around the nature of the requests that come through to you and your team around volunteering opportunities?
Thanks, Bex and Michael. So Volunteering New Zealand is the peak body. We hear from both the volunteer centres and member organisations. We've got a good, a good survey of what we're hearing. I think in relation to the slide, and actually the heading is basically the same note I've made, which is it's the mismatch. So although the intentions are good and we want corporates are wanting to connect with communities and causes, there is often a mismatch between corporate organisational needs and expectations and the operating environments of the charities. So volunteering in itself isn't something that is without operational costs. So for a charity or not-for-profit to enable that within their organisation, there is work that goes into it in terms of onboarding, recruitment, processes that fit around that, and I guess health and safety training, bringing people in takes energy and effort. think it's interesting to note that the gaps identified in that graph resonate very clearly with the time to shine research that came out post-COVID of what charities need. So that's interesting correlation there. I think another need in terms of that increase in the need for employee volunteers, when we look to New Zealand, we have seen a drop in the number of formal volunteers between 2013 to 2018. So there's absolutely the need there. But yeah, typically there's a mismatch. What we hear from charities often is that the corporate's expectations are sometimes hard to deliver on in terms of timeframes and the notice period and organising it, and perhaps the number of volunteers that are available. But we are also seeing a shift in employee volunteering programs. So obviously any employee volunteering is a good thing, and some of it looks like a one-day tree planting exercise, but some of the programs are evolving to be more relationship based, so that the employee is able to build a relationship with a charity and have an experience that is ongoing and maybe more flexible. Charities often don't necessarily have all their employee volunteering opportunities at 4 o'clock or 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. It might be out of hours, it might be a board meeting in the evening. There's lots of flexibility is coming in there slowly.
Oh, that's great. And it's actually, Sarah, that's one of the examples that you shared with me, just in one of the really positive examples for you, albeit you've had one and it was a few years ago now. You really talked really highly of the impact. Do you just want to share a bit more about that?
Kia ora. Charities like us, they don't just need donations, they need good advice and to connect with experiences in areas outside of our day-to-day mission. So for a business to offer a charity some of that wisdom, connect them with a network, or to help them with things that they don't know how to do, or even have the resources to look into, it's extremely helpful. So we don't have a lot of extra resources to risk too much in developing new business partnership opportunities. So when a company called Pure SEO came to us and offered to set up a Google AdWords account, it was really awesome. Once it's set up, charities can access up to $10,000 worth of free advertising through Google, but you've got to invest the time and the resources dealing with the tech stuff. So it actually took 2 weeks. We actually wouldn't have got there easily on our own. So offering us to access something that they do day to day, it's not a big deal for them, really helped us. And in terms of real dollar spend for Pure SEO, it might have been a small investment, but the impact for us is really large and long lasting in our charity and for the communities that we support. On top of this, it's a huge morale boost to actually get some support yourself. And it does go both ways. We can give back in ways businesses might not be aware of. We connect with over 80,000 people per year. We've developed really trusted long-term relationships all over Aotearoa. And we have unique insights into helping with something that really impacts everybody, mental health. Other charities have a myriad of connections and cultures and collaborations that can benefit businesses too.
It's such a valid point, and we're actually going to spend quite a lot of time talking on just that. So hold that thought for later on in our discussion, Sarah. I think you make a really good point, though, that it doesn't just have to be time and money. There's so much more that perhaps businesses aren't aware of that can make a real difference. Johanna, what's your perspective for someone, Genesis, who's known for several community partnerships and opportunities? What are your thoughts? What's worked?
Genesis is such a flexible, agile, forward-thinking, diverse company. So we took that into consideration when we refreshed our approach to volunteering about a year ago. We acknowledge that there is a space for teams, getting teams together and going outdoors and spending quality time in the environment. But we also started investigating this option of, so what would it look like if we take the amazing amount of skills that we've got in the company and we apply that in the volunteering space? So having said that, just let me give you some background. What was happening in the same time in the business is we had such a strong focus on upskilling all our people leaders in the coaching area, because that's a critical skill that every leader should have. So we were training, and we just went through a training program for most of our leaders to upskill them, upskill their coaching skills. And then what we did is we realized that coaching is a skill that needs to be practiced. So we started a coach guild in-house, allowing the space for our coaches to practice that skill. So while all of that was happening, we learned about Springboard Trust. Now, Springboard Trust sits in this education sector, in the space of education, and they offer leadership programs to school principals. And those programs are supported by coaching. So what we then did is we said, we've got the skills, let's try this, let's see how it works. And we contacted Springboard Trust. They are amazing, very professional. They onboarded us, and they took really good care of our coaches. It is amazing. I have to tell the story. It is amazing to see, before a coach really goes out and coach for the first time in the school principal space, how nervous that they are and how concerned they are, because they go like, am I really going to add value? And then after that experience, after that first coaching conversation, they come back into the business, and their confidence and their skills has just grown so much. And then that spills back into our workplace. And, you know, they coach with so much more confidence, and that is there's a direct link to our performance in-house.
Yeah.
What also works really nice is Springboard Trust gives us written feedback. So, you know, that's the best motivator to keep you growing and to keep you continuing with this. So our volunteers who's coaching in the Springboard space, they all go like, 8 hours is not enough for us. Give us more time so that we can give back more.
Nice.
To the community. So that was a very successful venture.
Yeah, and that's such a good example of business value and social value. And, you know, you're really taking an opportunity to hit a more meaningful learning experience as well as a more meaningful volunteering experience. I really love that example. Thanks for sharing.
Cool. No problem.
Michael, did you have any additional stats or research on that skilled volunteering?
Yeah, I mean, it's such an important point and a lovely example, as you say. We did, for the first time this year, we asked about leadership schemes in charities, because, you know, it's something we do, but more broadly, the value of people engaging as part of leadership programs, taking a skill like the coaching skill you were talking about to a charity. And interestingly, from the charity perspective, the charities that have been involved in this were really positive about it. You know, the stats are in the report, but 70% who'd worked with those type of volunteers felt that they were more valuable than typical volunteers. I think bringing that skill, but also bringing that, having a real interest in training that skill. And over 80% actually said that they took more time to really engage and understand the charity. So I think there's real value for both sides in the kind of example that Johanna's talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, let's crack on to discussion point 2, and that charities' resources for managing relationships are extremely limited.
Definitely. And guys, if any of you in the audience have any questions, just remember to put them in the Q&A, and you can guide us towards what you want to know. So yeah, this was touched on in the opening remarks actually, but we asked charities whether they had dedicated resources to managing relationships with businesses. And this graph I'm showing you is what we found. Interestingly, only 32% of the respondents said that this was either someone's entire role or it was a large part of their role. So only about a third. And by contrast, over 64% said that they had no staff at all for managing relationships with businesses, or that it was only a very small part of the role. So even bearing in mind what we said about that, these being smaller charities, that's such an important thing for both businesses and charities to know when they're having relationships together. And when you sort of add to that this sense that perhaps businesses don't always appreciate the resource burden it can take on the charity side for managing a volunteering day. It's really powerful, and there was perhaps a rising sense that sometimes it can actually cost more for the charity to do certain types of volunteering than the value they get from it. So essentially a really powerful message coming out that, and I think it's about volunteering, but it's also more widely about business and charity relationships, that part of forming a really successful relationship is to be clear from the start about what the demands are, what the resource needs are, and be very open and make sure that there's a sort of plan for what is needed from both sides from the very beginning.
Yeah, and I think it's really relevant to New Zealand's context that, you know, we have such a large number of small charities. Sarah, you shared with me your dilemma, you know, in this situation, that actually just putting aside the time to build relationships can sometimes feel like a gamble. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that?
Kia ora. We're in the business of providing mental health and support and education. Partnership development with businesses is becoming even more important for us to focus on. And it's true, we're really good at making every dollar stretch really far. So investing into business relationship from scratch can draw away some of those reserves. So we have to be really smart about how we do it. So when you get a yes, somebody says, it's an opportunity to meet with a business, it's really great news. It's something for us to even celebrate about. But it can be a bit of a gamble when you go to meet, for example, with corporates. I remember a 30-minute meeting with a bank, which turned into a 3-hour session with myself and a psychologist, one of our team, giving them advice. They were seeking advice on issues they were having. And I know we made a big difference. They came away with a lot of great insights. We helped that manager immensely. And on that front, we were really happy. We thought, this is fantastic. We've helped them out. And that was on the charity's time, of course. A month later, that manager moved on and we lost that footing in that relationship development. So unfortunate, yes. So we're really grateful to have the opportunity to connect with businesses because we know we can be really valuable to them and their staff and their customers, and we do truly want to help. We certainly appreciate that people are busy and things do happen. When it could get challenging, or have experience of this, is that if there's a series of moved or cancelled meetings, lots of follow-ups to rebook, email back and forth, because that's a bigger impact on charities than perhaps some businesses might appreciate. I imagine a lot of small business owners would get this. If you spend a few hours on something, the other thing still needs doing. So you see your team still working, you know, late at night, hours after they're due to leave, putting volunteer time in. And for many reasons, you've got to evaluate what you're spending your time on every day. That's a little bit where you can feel like you are gambling, and at the same time you're investing and you are hoping for a good outcome.
Yeah, and I think it's just really common in our charity sector. So I'm going to launch another poll to get you all listening involved. It's quiz time. Let's just see how much you do know about the nature of our charity sector. First question, how many registered charities does New Zealand have? Oh, let me launch it. Sorry, apologies. Should be able to see that now. Even though it says multi-choice, just pick one. Be brave. And of those charities, you know, only 0.5% operate with a budget of over 30 million. But we want to know, how many do you think operate with a budget of less than 125,000? And even, how many do you think operate with a budget of less than 10,000? Just give you another 5 seconds there. Chuck in some answers. Okay. Yeah, so most of you guys have kind of guessed the point here. We have 27,746 registered charities, which, as Michael said, is the most number per head of population in the world. However, majority of them run with very, very little operating budget. And in fact, you know, 5,000, 6,000 of them run with less than 10,000 budget per year. So it's a real point to make that actually there are so many charities out there. It's perhaps spending a bit more time going to try and find them rather than the ones with the big advertising campaigns and the logos that we're already familiar with. Okay, let's move on to discussion point 3. For those of you who are listening and you've got some thoughts, please share your thoughts, your musings as we go through, put them in the chat box. Any specific question around that, any insights, put them in the Q&A and we'll answer them as we go along.
So the third big finding of the report, and the thing we wanted to highlight was this point around small charities, very well set up by the New Zealand context there. And whilst 98% of the small charities who responded to the research said they'd like more relationships with businesses, we found that they were 3 times more likely than larger charities who've had absolutely no interaction with a business at all in the last year. And they were also 3 times less likely to have any kind of formal relationship or partnership. So, the message is that, as perhaps you might expect, these smaller charities are much less plugged in and therefore much less benefiting from the amazing sort of opportunities that a business relationship can bring. We think, and certainly in the UK, but part of this reason is that a lot of businesses have taken quite a central approach to charity partnerships, and perhaps are doing that even more so in recent years. So almost making it less likely that they'll then work with smaller, more local charities. And it's a really interesting discussion about whether the coronavirus has changed that in some way and actually plugged people back into local communities with employees working from home a lot more. One local charity described the sort of experience. This is a small local charity, and said just the usual experience of being dismissed by most of the local contacts with that's handled centrally. We already support X name charity. We don't have any plans to work with local partners. So just that sense from some that it's kind of hard to get that conversation, get the foot in the door. And certainly we see this as a real missed opportunity. And I think for 3 reasons really. The first being these smaller charities are often in great need of support, but also often provide amazing experiences for volunteers to work directly with beneficiaries. We've also found from experience that business can see incredible impact from working with smaller charities. Sometimes the really big charities work with loads and loads of people, and that actually you find the right match at a smaller level and you can have an amazing impact. And then thirdly, it's an amazing way to get people in businesses connected to local community issues. So there's a COVID need, if ever you've heard.
Yeah, definitely. Just makes me think, Johanna, what's Genesis' experience of working with both larger and smaller charities?
Bix, I don't think it really makes a difference to us. So what we did when we refreshed our approach is we made sure that our systems and our processes in-house is in order. For example, we got a nice SharePoint site where we post opportunities or events where people can go and have a look and see what's available. But the key thing is that we post our people's stories so that whole awareness grows about, so I want to volunteer, but I'm not sure where do I want to do it, where's it going to fit? And then if you start reading the other people's stories, it triggers ideas. And linking into what Michael just said, when we went into the first lockdown, the mindset sort of was, we're going into lockdown, no volunteering is going to happen. And our thoughts was, no, this is the time when New Zealand actually really needs us now. And we connected with Hattingh, and we've got a huge call center. And in that time when New Zealand needed it, they offered us, or they requested us to help the Rotorua Business Chamber by making calls to the small businesses so that they can quickly gather enough data so that they can make the next decision. So that was really meaningful. It took a couple of our agents to do that important work. And, so size doesn't matter. Our people's stories are very important, having a place where people can go and getting into those habits. And the other thing that I want to mention here is critical is leadership support. If you've got your leaders involved and they're paving the way, it's easy for everybody else to follow.
Yeah, thank you. It's really good insight. I'm just seeing some great questions come through. Thank you. We will get to those. I'm just going to bring in Michelle before I start to tackle those questions and put them to the panel. Michelle, what's your thoughts on how we help organisations maybe find those smaller charities? And is it, you know, shifting attitudes from the we want to be seen to have the bigger charity logo on our websites, etc., and helping them to move towards more of a, we are interested in deeper relationships and better stories, to Johanna's point. What's your thoughts on that?
Thanks, Bex. I've got a few points, so I'll try to be succinct, but just to the resourcing issue in terms of the amount of money and the size of charities, just to add that there's 27,000 charities, as we know, but there's actually 115,000 not-for-profits. So there's a bigger pool of organisations out there for corporates to interact with.
Right.
That also there is, within the charity sector, I think it's like 1 in 3 full FTEs are a volunteer, but if you broaden that out to the not-for-profit sector in total, 90% of our charities and not-for-profit sector is run by volunteers. So I think that's really something to always bring to the forefront of understanding the resource relationship constraints around the sector. I'd just also like to note, I think that COVID has really, really underscored, and Joanna's example also illustrates this, that what charities can offer to government and the corporate sector is that we have relationships on the ground, and those are at the heart of community connectedness. So I think COVID has now underscored that more than ever and brought it to the fore, so, which is really exciting that it's more visible. It's always been there, and there's always been expertise around communities and causes within the community sector. So, connecting with the wide range of organisations that are out there, I really need to draw attention to the Volunteer Centre Network. So they are 17 organisations around the country that do the brokering bit, the mahi that connects corporates and smaller organisations. So there's room for building your own relationships, but there's also opportunities to connect in with the Volunteer Centre Network, who do specialise in arranging days and corporate or employee volunteering opportunities for a range of organisations, and they have the relationships on the ground. They have memberships of like 200 to 300 small not-for-profits in their own area, so I definitely recommend connecting in with them. Yeah. But I do think it is about building relationships in the longer term, and having those relationships on the ground.
Yeah, and that's a really good tip. Thanks, Michelle.
You did ask about stories, and moving from logos to stories. I would just say really quickly that I think it's about mission and vision and values is at the heart of the building the relationships for all of us. And if that's at the front of how we talk about what we do, then I think we get better engagement and better connectivity. So not about logos, but about the what is at the heart of the relationship. Yeah,
nice. And actually Roger has asked a really good question here that just links onto what you were saying. He's got a question for all of you panelists. You probably can see it, but he raises the good point that, you know, the very fact that we have so many charities is actually probably our biggest problem. And you know, our biggest barrier to building those relationships. And his thought is that actually that structure is unsustainable. What do you think, panelists, around that structure in New Zealand of just having so many charities registered?
Personally, I think that's a separate issue to what we're talking about today. I think actually one of the reasons we have a lot of community organisations is because of the way things are structured, and the community organisations meet the needs of their communities.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I've got a couple of other questions here that we will tackle before we move on. Janie from B Collective has asked just for some thoughts on what do you think the opportunity is for skilled volunteering to include policymakers spending more time in the communities? And
I can answer that just quickly, because we actually made a submission. So one of the things that Volunteering New Zealand does is advocacy on behalf of the sector. The Public Sector Reform Act that's coming through, we did make a submission to try and highlight the opportunities for public sector employment contracts to embrace employee volunteering, because they're not typically in there for the public sector. Volunteer Wellington has done a lot of awesome employee volunteering things with different departments, so we're kind of making some inroads there. So that's from a Wellington perspective.
Yeah, interesting. And also just a point, if you want to continue the conversation, if you know the information that you're hearing here, you want to carry on, please make the most. We're going to follow up this with an email with an opportunity to continue the conversation. So please, if you haven't got all the information or you haven't got your question answered, please hold that thought, and we would love to continue that with you. Just finally, Charlie has asked, and I don't know if you've got some stats here, Michael, about the difference between employee volunteers versus volunteering in general. And Charlie's got an observation that there's an increase in one-off volunteering in general. So does that drive, or does that reflect what's also happening in the employment volunteering space? So employees just want to do the one-off, experience, and then they can say, I've done that. Or actually, is there an opportunity for longer-term, deeper volunteering opportunities?
So, I mean, the report is focused on employee volunteers. Right. Maybe I have a thought on that question. But just in terms of the report, what we found, there is an interesting section about small charities' needs, and we very clearly found that what small charities, even more than other charities, need is ongoing volunteering. So exactly to your point, that I think only 3% said they needed one-off volunteering. It's just very hard. The amount of effort it takes to do a sort of one-off episode, it just isn't worth it. So really echoes your point about the need for ongoing volunteering. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, certainly don't know about the sort of broader picture in New Zealand. I think we've kind of found it happen both ways in the UK, that yes, there's a lot of people sort of wanting to do get people out for a day, good for the business. But we've also seen a growth, I think, in the value that really sort of skilled ongoing volunteering can offer for people in business. So the business value of it, and that recognition of how it can be an incredible way to develop leaders, get them out working on real issues, testing their skills in different environments. That whole piece, I think, actually lends itself much more to ongoing volunteering. So perhaps the answer is there's been a bit of both, I think. Certainly. Okay.
Sorry, I've got some stuff to add in. I think there's a couple of things. Actually, yes, people are moving to, there's a trend towards wanting to have one-off opportunities, but there's also data that shows having had a one-off opportunity or connected with an organisation, people will often stay. So sometimes like employee volunteering actually may help tackle a barrier that exists to volunteering, which is employment. So there may be a whole pile of people who come to volunteering for the first time through employee volunteering and then stay or find another cause to connect to. So
that's a great point. Yeah. And I tend to think, especially through the COVID context, a lot of us have gone through that process of just clarifying what's really important and finding meaning in work and at home. And I think that's probably trickling through to, how our community relationships present themselves. They want more meaning. That's becoming really important. So the one-off, while all volunteering is good, what we talked about earlier, there's probably more take up or more interest in perhaps being able to see a longer term difference perhaps. So it's probably, I would like to think, and I believe that it's probably a growing trend. Okay, well let's, thank you for the questions. There's, I am going to save a couple more for the end. So hold that thought, I haven't ignored you. Let's move on to our final discussion point, and it's a big one. Great relationships go beyond just volunteering and fundraising. It's kind of what we've just started to touch on now. And this is really looking at the opportunity for businesses to rethink what they mean by community partnership and what's possible, what's available. One of the many benefits comes from deeper relationships. And perhaps with a deeper relationship with a smaller charity, what's on offer is this concept of charity insight.
Yes, exactly. And I think it plays to the point in the question, Janie was making. It's about going beyond volunteering and thinking about that huge expertise that charities and their beneficiaries have on the world out there. Whether that's policymakers or whether that's people from business wanting to learn about their customers or their colleagues. It's an amazing way to learn about what's really going on in society. We asked the respondents, how many of you believe your charity has got that kind of insight to offer? And 86% said, yep, absolutely. Whether that's about understanding customers or whether that's about using that insight about particular issues to develop products and services. To give you a few examples of the kind of thing we're talking about, we had an example of an environmental charity advising land management companies on planting for pollinators. We had an example of an older person's charity helping a company to understand the signs of dementia and provide the support needed for older people to access those services. And another one, which we had loads of these, it's great stuff, but one about a disability charity that worked with a local bus company, training their drivers and helping redesign the buses. So, real insight of whatever the issue is and getting that into the heart of a business to sort of change the way they operate. But I guess the sort of flip side of that was certainly in the UK, only about half of charities who said they had that kind of insight were getting an opportunity to really share it. So, we're huge untapped resource there, and perhaps a bit of a missed opportunity at the moment to really make more of.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important point. There's just a real opportunity here to take that volunteering or community partnership to another level and move it from giving and giving time or money to really collaborating, learning, relationships. Sarah, you've already touched on this before, but I wonder if you want to just continue talking about what you can offer businesses, given that you're a charity on such a topical social issue.
Thanks, Bex. An important question is to think about what matters to the people who make your business work. And if you think about your team, everybody experiences anxiety. You think about the clients that use a business, they experience anxiety, their friends, their peers, their loved ones. So we're all connected in the same way. How people get on outside of work is directly going to impact how they get on inside the business as well. And humans are immensely impacted by their environment and the level of support that they have. So people in your business, they might not be talking to you about how they're really doing, but they are talking to us. And it's not just the work. Your team may have deep, trusted personal connections with the work of other charities that a business is not aware of. So connecting with things that your people care about within the organisation is really valuable. At Anxiety New Zealand, we're a collection of hundreds of thousands of stories and individual experiences, and we help an incredible number of people based on our budget. We're deeply connected in the community and with workforces across all ages. So we're actually inside businesses already, even though they don't know that. So we're helping their staff, their managers, even their customers with their health and well-being. So if a business really engages in the things that truly matter to their people, you can develop really rewarding and long-standing relationships with a lot of goodwill. So we can have conversations that businesses find really hard to have, or their culture creates a barrier for them to engage in. Even if you want to change the culture within a business, especially if you're using the same formula, it can be really hard. And not all businesses have a safe and supported culture where health and wellbeing thrives. And it's been shown over and over that happy staff make businesses thrive. So if you work with a charity, you benefit from the experience and trust building. It's a direct connection to the things that matter to your people.
Yeah, it's a good point. It can go two ways, you know. I think that's such an important point to make, that volunteering doesn't have to be the business giving and sacrificing or donating, volunteering. There's a real opportunity for what can come back the other way, and how you can capture that learning. Johanna and Michelle, do you have any thoughts on that point, on charity insight?
Sarah very gracefully summarized it beautifully. I think that's what all of our intents are, is that we've got the brands, we've got capable people, a very strong, capable workforce, and we've got passion. So it's a matter of how are we making that count? How are we aligning that in a very impactful way, both for the business and for New Zealand?
Nice one.
I sort of touched on this earlier. I think COVID really underscored the real value, or brought to the surface, or made it more visible, the value of connection and what community organisations have to offer the rest of the country. I wouldn't add anything more to what Johanna and Sarah have put, except to just say, we talk about skilled and unskilled, and every type of volunteering brings some sort of skill to the table, I think. But I think the key point I wanted to make is that volunteers can do anything. So there's an opportunity to really get creative and explore new ways to engage volunteers through the employee volunteering process. And yeah, I might leave it there. No, we're running short of time.
Yeah, no, thank you. And you know, the report does include a couple of sections with more information on this. So, you know, to learn or consider more about it, it is available for you. We are getting to the wrap up point of our discussion. And I'm just gonna prompt you on the line. I know we've got a couple of questions that, if you don't mind, I might forward those directly to Johanna. There's a bit of interest in how you've done your scheme there. So after we sign off, I might connect you to those queries, and you can have a really in-depth conversation. But for everyone else on the line, just to start thinking about where do you see the biggest opportunity for action? You know, you've got some insights and some perspectives this morning. As we start to close, please share your musings or your own insights around where you might be able to make some traction in improving or renewing or starting some community relationships. So while you're thinking, I'll just summarize some of our points that we discussed. We started off with looking at how we found that often there's a challenge between the business agenda versus what the charity needs. We talked about the challenge of having smaller charities. They don't have the capacity to necessarily broker those relationships themselves, and that those small charities not only have real needs, but they also offer a ton of insight that can go the other way. So please do start to share your thoughts and reflections on the conversation, where you think you might be able to make some difference with regards to those relationships in your own world. Panelists, did you have any final words, any final thoughts?
I would just add about the move we want to see ideally is from the sort of transactional volunteering to the transformative, where the benefits accrue both ways to volunteer organisation that's one that has the volunteer, and also the companies or the corporates that build capital, social capital, connectedness, and support causes.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, I really like the way that articulation of it, Michelle, you know, the transactional to the transformational. And I think, I don't know, we just find the people from our work that often you invest that time, you sort of find the match, and actually the benefits that come out from a relationship like that can be huge, you know, for both sides. And you know, loving hearing Sarah's stories about the whole mental health side, and there's huge benefits to be had, mutual benefits to be had here. So I think it's a really exciting time, and I think COVID has opened up opportunities as well as a lot of challenges, but opportunities to really think about how to get the most out of these kind of relationships.
Yeah, yeah. Indeed. Thanks, Pam. Yeah, I think that's hitting a bit of a nerve, that language around going from transactional to transformational. I think it's really current today, and what both employees are looking for as well, not just organisations or charities. You know, that can really serve your own employee engagement survey. You know, they don't just want to tip the $10 button from my payroll and feel like I've helped out. I really want to make a difference in the long term. So it's a really good point. I do want to take this opportunity to thank all of you panelists. I really appreciate your time, sharing your stories and your perspectives. For everyone, I will be following up with some key points from today, the recording and the report, but also to bring some attention, Social Value Aotearoa is running some similar conversations this week. They have a themed week, Social Value Matters, NZ Talks Impact. And so they are also having some, so they've got some resources and some conversations happening, and I'll include some information on that on the follow-up email. I'll check with my panelists if you're comfortable to connect with some of the specific questions related to you. There's some really good insight, or some questions seeking your insight around how they might do things differently. So please keep sharing your thoughts. We're going to stay on the line for another 2 minutes. It's really nice for us to see what you're thinking about, and perhaps what you've gained out of the conversation, what you might want to hear more of. Please keep those thoughts coming through. It's really helpful. Otherwise, really big thank you for your time. I've enjoyed the conversation. Michael, it's well past your bedtime. Thank you especially to you for sharing the research again, and for joining our conversation today.
Absolutely, yeah. And as you say, it's on your website. There's a lot more that we haven't touched on. So if anyone wants to see it, freely available on the Three Hands New Zealand website. Yeah,
good one. Cool. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I will stay on the line for another 90 seconds. If anyone's got any final questions or thoughts, I'll do that. Otherwise, feel free to go and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks very, very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bex, and thanks to the audience with the great questions.
Yeah, really good questions.
And engagement.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool.